Welcome back to The Look and Sound of Leadership, an ongoing series of executive coaching tips designed to help you be perceived in the workplace the way you want to be perceived. I'm Tom Henschel, your executive coach, and today we're talking about coaching versus therapy. Anastasia felt like a fraud. She had landed a position that was 5 times greater in scope and responsibility than any she had held before. During our first coaching conversation, she told me, everything's been fine on the job so far, but I'm walking on needles. I can feel it in my gut, and I'm worried I'm going to get found out. That you're a fraud, I asked. That I'm over my head? Yeah, she said. Is it true, I asked. Are you over your head? She started to blurt an answer, and then stopped. She thought a second, and then said sincerely, No, I know what I'm doing. But damn, it sure doesn't feel that way. Is that part of you familiar, I asked. You mean, have I felt like a fraud before? Oh, yeah, but never like this. I am losing sleep over this. I asked, when it's happened before, what happens to that feeling of being a fraud? Does it go away? Thank God. Yes, she said. I don't feel this way all the time. God forbid. Wouldn't that be awful? I asked, is there any reason to think this time would be different, that your feelings wouldn't change? I don't know, she said. This feels bigger. If I screw this up, it's going to be public. I'd survive it, but it would not be fun. Lots at stake, I suggested. And I don't trust myself, she said. You don't trust yourself? Why? I worry I'm missing a blind spot. Some part of me that I can't see is going to betray me. I start second-guessing myself. It makes me crazy. Truly. Like the not sleeping. That's crazy. It sounds like you're suffering, Anastasia. I'm sorry, I said. She waved her hand and blew out a breath, shaking it off. Whatever. Like I said, it'll probably just go away. Whew, that was intense. I feel like I've been in therapy. You do? How so? I asked. I don't usually talk about my feelings like that. And that's what you do in therapy, right? Talk about your feelings. Sure, some. And that's not the only thing you talk about in therapy, but yes, feelings are certainly a topic of conversation. Have you been in therapy? She asked. I smiled. I'm pretty much always in therapy. I've been working with the same therapist more than 20 years, and I was in therapy before I met her. I love therapy. She laughed. Love therapy? How does anyone love therapy? Well, because of what you said, I answered. You talked about being worried there was some blind spot that would betray you. That was how I got raised. You had blind spots, and your blind spots were going to betray you, for certain. I went into therapy to see if I could head off the catastrophe. And for the most part, it has worked. Therapy has helped me, and I love it for that. Therapy helped you see into your blind spots, she asked. It did for me, I said. How? She asked seriously. I would love to see into my blind spots. How does therapy make that happen? I thought and then said, 2 things come to mind. First, therapy taught me to look for patterns. We all have patterns in our lives, and a lot of the times, those patterns are our blind spots. Therapy helped me recognize patterns in my past and plant ones I wanted in my future. Doing that, recognizing patterns, helped shrink my blind spots. And second, my therapist. My therapist has always been a great reflector. She sees my blind spots, and she reflects them back to me in a way I can see them. She's really been a gift in my life. I'm so intrigued, Anastasia said. And then she laughed. Do you think I need therapy? I laughed back. Who doesn't? But I'm doing coaching instead, she said. Pretty much the same thing, right? Oh, not to me, I said. To me, they feel very different. To me, coaching and therapy have different goals and different methods. She said, because therapy talks about feelings and coaching focuses on work? I smiled. Are you suggesting there aren't feelings at work? No, of course there are, but do you talk about feelings in coaching? I almost always do, I said. Feelings are part of work. As a coach, I want to help make your work better, and one way to do that might be to help you manage your feelings about work. She shrugged. Well, you got me talking about my feelings. Okay, then what is the difference between coaching and therapy? You said there was one. Can I make it a metaphor, I asked. Sure, she said. So let me start by saying I think coaching and therapy share a common belief. Coaching and therapy both believe that the behaviors we exhibit as adults are driven in large part by experiences we had when we were young. Coaching and therapy both start with the belief that we all carry wounds from our childhood, and as adults, those wounds can create problems in our lives. But here's where coaching and therapy differ. Suppose you're driving down the road of life and you hit a pothole, and you recognize the pothole as a pattern in your life, and you think to yourself, I hit a pothole just like that a while back. And then you hit another pothole and you think, I really would like to stop hitting those potholes. That would make my life a whole lot better. If you put a therapist in your passenger seat to help you stop hitting the potholes, the next time you approach a pothole, the therapist is going to have you stop the car, get out of the car, and walk to the pothole, look down in the pothole, get down in the pothole, and then the therapist is going to teach you how to repair the pothole from the bottom up. You put layer after layer, and the pothole gets smaller and smaller until one day the pothole is filled in. The road is smooth. Healing happened. And there's a possibility that that pothole may never appear on your road again. That is therapy. If you put a coach in your passenger seat, the coach is going to help you drive around the pothole. She laughed. I went on, the pothole is still going to be there. There was no healing, but coaching can help you manage your patterns, and that's the difference. She said, so the goal for therapy is? I said, healing. And the goal for coaching? Improved performance. She said, healing is inward-facing. Improved performance is outward-facing. Was that intentional? Oh, I don't think so, I said. I don't know. I'd never split it up in my head like that. Therapy is inward-facing and coaching is outward-facing. I like that a lot. She said, you said everyone has wounds. I believe that too. In that metaphor, are the potholes people's wounds? In a way, yeah, sure. Not always consciously. People might recognize a pattern without seeing how far back it goes in their lives. She said, or they may not even have any concept that wounds are a real thing, let alone that they show up in our adult lives. She took a breath and said, you said coaching and therapy have different methods, right? What do different methods look like? I said, do you remember when I asked you if the fraud part was familiar to you? She nodded. I said, a therapist is going to ask that question and follow it up with a lot of why questions. Why do you think that feeling happens? Why did the feeling change? Why didn't the feeling change? Why is that pattern in your life at all? And you talk about your inner life. Therapy's method, just like you said, is inward-facing. Lots of why questions. When a coach asks you about the fraud part of you being familiar, the coach is going to follow it up with questions that are what questions and how questions. What was the best part of that? And how could you do things differently? Outward facing. We don't explore why. She said, because you're going for performance, not healing? I nodded. So the methods are different. Plus, she said, you're not trained to be a healer, are you? No, absolutely, we are not. I think about that every time a client asks if coaching is therapy. And just because I've been in therapy 20 years doesn't make me a therapist. Heck, I've been taking some medications for 20 years, doesn't make me a pharmacist. She laughed. I continued, our profession hammers into us that we are not healers. And having watched what my therapist does with me, I know there's just no way I could do that for anyone else. That is not my gift. But seriously, why not? She asked. It's just a different discipline. Plus, in coaching, we don't have time. She shrugged. Well, our contract is 6 months with an option for another 6. I said, healing takes longer than 6 months, even if I knew how to do it, which I don't. She said, but coaching can still help me feel like less of a fraud. You can help me with that? I think so, yes. It's the idea of the pothole. At the moment, your pothole is feeling like a fraud. I'm going to help you drive around it. Anastasia's coaching gave her tools for managing her feelings of being a fraud. She could feel herself driving around the pothole, but she longed for healing. When we last spoke, she had begun working with a therapist and she was enjoying the process. She saw that the combination of coaching and therapy was easing her path to the look and sound of leadership. The spark for this episode came because two clients recently both said they felt like they were talking to a therapist. I've heard that comment a lot over the years. It doesn't surprise me any longer, and I think I know why people feel that way. I think it's because of something very special that happens during the coaching. You get listened to. You get listened to deeply. And I've come to believe that many people never experience being listened to deeply. During their coaching, people often experience being listened to deeply for the very first time. And I think it's a bit like taking mushrooms. You expand. You get transported to a new place where it is suddenly safe to be vulnerable. And feeling safe and vulnerable is healing. So it's completely natural to think this is probably what therapy is like. So this episode grew out of all my clients over the years who have said to me they felt like they were in therapy. In this part of the show, I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about that fraudster feeling. I want to answer the question you might have asked yourself, which is, what do you talk about in therapy for 20 years? And I want to talk about the qualities that I think will help you whether you're going into coaching or therapy. So first, about that fraudster feeling. One of my editors read the episode and said he felt cheated because where were the tools to address feeling like a fraud? Wasn't that Anastasia's whole issue? And of course he was right, that's her issue, but this episode was not about that. But it does raise the issue. If you know that feeling of being a fraud, what tools could you grab? I want to give you one action and 3 resources to combat feeling like a fraud. And sometimes, this is called imposter syndrome. It's the same thing. So here's the action. Talk back. When you feel like an imposter, it means that in your head, there's a voice telling you things that make you feel that way. But those things usually are not true. Do you remember when I asked Anastasia, was she actually in over her head? And what did she say? She said, no, she wasn't. But where did she start? She started by saying, I am over my head, as if it were true. That's how it felt to her. I asked her to talk back to the feeling because the feeling isn't telling her the truth. But the feeling feels like truth, and it's old in her life, so it is familiar. When you have a familiar voice who makes you feel bad about yourself, talk back. Reality check it. Do not accept untruths. And don't be bullied into being fearful. Talk back. That's the tool. 3 resources for battling imposter syndrome. In 2018, I posted an episode of the show called The Executive Impostor. It has all the tools that my editor was wanting. If you experience imposter syndrome, give it a listen. There's lots of tools. The link is in the show notes. Another resource, I still love the works on self-esteem by Nathaniel Branden, and most particularly the writing exercises that he proposes. I would start with Self-Esteem at Work. It has lots of tools in it. It's an easy read. And then finally, The Confidence Code by Katty Kay and Claire Shipman. I know many of you already know this. This is a book that was written by 2 really accomplished women journalists who, in spite of all of their successes, felt like frauds. And so they investigated, what was going on? The results of their investigation is the whole first part of the book, and the evidence is overwhelming that women are prone to feeling like frauds. The second part of the book is filled with tools to help. The Confidence Code. Okay, those are the 3 resources for feeling like a fraud, plus the action. Talk back. That was all number 1. Number 2, what do you talk about in therapy for 20 years? I was wondering about that. And you know who I wanted to answer that question? My therapist, Robin Sevitz. I asked if I could name her on the show. She said yes. So I know that Robin teaches and supervises other therapists. I know she thinks a lot about what therapy is and what therapy means. And so I wanted to hear her thoughts about all of this. And I asked her first, just was it unusual to have a client for 20 years? And she said it was not unheard of. She said lots of her clients work with her over many years. And so I asked, what do you talk about with someone for 20 years? What's in your head? And she started by saying that the purpose for her, the purpose of therapy, is for a patient to feel seen and deeply known. Be seen and deeply known. And those words really struck me deeply. Robin said, a therapist helps someone feel seen and deeply known by joining them on the personal journey they are taking through their life and being a witness who adds value to that life by giving it their full attention. She treats that life as if it has inherent value. To experience that from another human being over years and years, that your life has inherent value, is healing. I can attest. It is. You will not be surprised that Robin turned the question to me. What did I think we had been talking about for 20 years? I said I thought a lot of the topics were the same, but my entire way of thinking about the topics has changed. One thing that I've gotten out of our long relationship has been her voice in my head. When I'm uncertain about anything, I can carry Robin's voice forward and I can find help. And that comes after 20 years of conversation. I am deeply grateful. Robin, thank you. I still want to talk about the qualities that I think are going to help you whether you're going into coaching or therapy, but since I opened the door to gratitude, let me jump into this month's gratitude. This month, gratitude to Adam Packard and Paul Butler. Adam is the host of a podcast called I Need a Coach. It's a show for and about coaches. Adam had me on. We talked about building a referral-based coaching practice. We talked about a bunch of stuff. And you can tell Adam's a coach. He always has another question ready to ask. It was a really lively conversation. The link is in the show notes. Or it's on the Essential Communications website. It's in a tab called Conversations. Adam, thanks. Gratitude to Paul Butler. Paul hosts a podcast called Take 5. He invites people on the show and he asks them, what's your one big idea in 5 minutes or less? And that is a really fun thought exercise. So I would love to hear what you think of my one big idea. The link is in the show notes. Thank you, Paul. A couple episodes ago, I mentioned there were no reviews that month, and so there was no one specific to give gratitude to. Well, it appears that opened floodgates this month. So many reviews, so much gratitude. First, our very first review from China. We've had ratings in China, but never a review. This listener's name is in Chinese characters, so I'm at a loss for how to pronounce it. But the review was titled, Thank You for the Advice. And I want to say, you're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for posting. It is great to have our first review in China. We also got our first review this month in Costa Rica from Coach Eugenia. Thank you. We got our first review from Uruguay, Bondi MVD. Thank you. And then in Canada, a listener named Menno Maller talked about gratitude. Their gratitude for this section of gratitude. And I really appreciated reading that. Thanks a lot. From the Netherlands, BArts 2000. In the United Kingdom, there's Maddie LUK, Luke 88, and Anised. And then here in the U.S., Sab Smitty 1, David from Portland, yeah, that guy 1, K Gold 13, and Thused. Amazing. Thank you. I am so grateful. Thank you so much. Okay, a final thought. So let's suppose that this episode has inspired you and you want to engage in coaching and be listened to deeply. Or it has inspired you and you want to engage in therapy and be known deeply. How would you do that? I would say at a minimum, bring 2 qualities with you: curiosity and courage. At the very beginning of almost every corporate coaching engagement, the leader will get a 360-degree feedback report. So they're getting feedback from their direct reports and their bosses and their peers. My 360s are strictly anecdotal. It's only verbatim comments. There's no charts or percentages or boxes. It's just plain language about you. What's going well with you? And where is there room for growth with you? And it can be intense, 10, 12, 14 pages of verbatim comment after comment about you. Well, I am interested as your coach whether you're going to be able to approach that feedback with curiosity, because I'll be honest with you, I think it's hard to do. I mean, just suppose you get a feedback report and out of those, 10 pages of comments, 5 or 6 of them talk about you being difficult. I would understand if you wanted to know who said that. I would understand if you wanted examples so that you could understand the feedback better. I would understand if you were upset. Those would all be 100% understandable reactions. But none of them moves you forward. So remember, corporate coaching always has goals attached to it, and none of those reactions are going to move you towards your goals. Curiosity will. When you are curious, you consider the possibility. Maybe some people experience you as difficult. You approach that idea with willingness. It's a growth mindset, and it's a lot easier to stop hitting your potholes when you have a growth mindset. Be curious. Courage. I am honored. I see with almost every client I talk with, I see at some point, I see them do something hard. They consciously choose to break a habit, to risk new behavior, to think a new thought, to manage their feelings. They do something hard. And in the moment before you do something hard, you need courage. You need the voice who says to you, everything's going to be okay. You can do this. Courage creates growth, and curiosity creates growth. Whether you're in coaching or in therapy, bring your courage, bring your curiosity. I hope you know the whole purpose of the Look and Sound of Leadership is to support you in growth. So what else can I give you this month? There are 2 PDFs from our Essential Tools bin that might help. One is about blind spots and the Johari window, and the other one is about who is coachable. Because, not everyone is coachable. And this PDF might help you get clarity on that issue. They're linked in the show notes. Both those PDFs, they're free. Just go get them. If you want to browse the archive and see what is related, this episode is in 4 categories for women. And that echoes back to the whole thing of the confidence code, which is women are prone to this. So if you need help, I hope you will browse the archive. This is also in managing yourself, personal growth and self-development, and self-talk. And 5 specific episodes you might listen to are Coaching v Therapy. This was from 2008, one of the very first shows. It's 16 years ago. The ideas in it are very different than what you heard today. Coaching Under Attack, Unmasking a Stand-In, Taming the Wild Child. This has the concept of wounds with the most helpful idea I've ever heard. And by the way, I got it from Robin. It's been so helpful in my life. And then an episode that I mentioned before, The Executive Impostor. I hope they help. Until next time, I'm Tom Henschel. Thanks so much for listening.